Welcome to another episode of B2B Marketing Futures. Today we are diving into what it truly means to build a customer-centric culture in B2B organizations. We are joined by three brilliant marketing leaders, and together we will explore how their companies champion customer-first thinking, scale it across global teams, and operationalize it to drive its growth. But before we get into the discussion, I'd love for each of you to introduce yourselves a bit about your role, how customer centricity shows up in your day-to-day work. Kaushik, would you like to start and give a sentence on yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everyone. My name is Kaushik. I am a senior product marketer here at Atlassian. I primarily support our channel partners. So that means what are channel partners? Channel partners are like our resellers or managed service providers here at Atlassian. If you guys don't know what Atlassian is the company that makes the product Jira, and as well as Confluence, right? So we're all about teamwork and everything. And in terms of the customer-centric mindset we have at Atlassian, we have a really important value here. I don't know how appropriate the language is, but it's literally don't F the customer, one of our values on our company website. So that's literally one of our values. And that's the only time we can actually say the F word in our company. It's allowed. So that's great. And yeah, that's huge. So and don't F the customer is huge. But I think what's really cool about Atlassian is we are customer number 0 pretty much for everything. So every product we go to market with, we use internally first, right? We make sure that we're using that. And then that's what's, I think, really special, I think, here at Atlassian that I've not seen sometimes at my previous companies either. That's how we treat ourselves as our own customer, essentially. And we take that feedback, all those insights we gain, and try to go to market into supporting our customers in that way. So happy to dive a little bit deeper. I'll let other folks introduce themselves too. But thanks for bringing me on the podcast, Joaquin. It seems let's have a good time with our conversations here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that great introduction. Welcome.
Thanks, okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Karthik. I'm currently a staff product marketing manager at Confluent, and my area primarily covers our go-to-market efforts for the data streaming platform. Right. I'm fairly recent at Confluent. It's about my first month here, but I can already see why they've been so successful because of the customer centricity that they bring in, right? So one of the first few lines in the employee handbook that I was handed, and one of the first few things that happened during onboarding is that we need to build a product and build the processes and build interactions and engagements with customers, which lead to them loving our product and our company, right? With every product, with every new idea, the goal is to get to a most lovable version of it. And that shows up in how the team works together, in how the team gets feedback, in what kind of feedback gets prioritized and what kind of features gets prioritized. So we're excited to be on here. I think this is a super important topic. So excited to dive into this with Kaushik, Shira, and Jochen.
Thank you so much, Karthik. Shira, welcome.
Yeah, hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Shira Marks. I lead our industry and solutions marketing at Motive, which is a company that makes safety AI as well as operations software and AI for the physical economy. And it's so interesting what you were saying about Atlassian, where you're saying you're customer 0. We have the kind of opposite paradigm. We are nothing like our customers. We work with truck drivers and construction workers and people who are in the field all day, using their hands, using their bodies in these big pieces of machinery that I've never even so much as touched in my real life. And while we try to, bring some of our software into our own personal vehicles and into our own personal lives to try to emulate that customer 0 concept, it's not real. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about how do you build customer empathy and help our sort of more Silicon Valley, maybe technology colleagues understand the reality of our customers when being customer 0 is impossible. When I was at other companies, I used to work in the DevOps space or sort of at your more like classic big tech companies. I had the privilege of being customer 0, and you could understand the value of what you were doing, right? When I was at Salesforce as a solutions engineer, I could tell you why Salesforce was important. I use it every day. You guys at Jira, you understand why Jira is important. You use it every day. I can't tell you what it's like to drive 11 hours a day. And that's what we're trying to bring to our own internal folks who also don't know what that's like. But those are the people who we're trying to reach and the people who are trying to help make their businesses and lives a little bit safer and better. So it's kind of a different challenge because we can't use our own lived experience in the same way.
All right, so great perspectives. Thank you so much. Let's dig more into the how. So, how do you ensure customer insights are actually shared and acted upon across your organization? Like, do you use rituals, tooling, cross-functional alignment? What's working well for you, and what's still a work in progress?
Yeah, I think here at Atlassian, we take customer feedback very seriously. Whenever I can give you the product lens, right? So whenever we try to go to market with a product, we try to obviously alpha test, beta, have an early access program where we'll invite customers into the program, right? So we can get some initial feedback so that we can, when we go GA with a product, we are able to fine tune all that, right? So part of that is like regular check-ins with the sales team. So when we talked about the cross-functional piece, our product managers will be on the calls with sellers when they're trying to onboard them onto the early access program, because when it's early access, sellers don't have all the enablement ready right at that moment. Only when they're GA, that's when their sellers will be a little bit more good to go, but they need that support from product. So our product and sales cross-functional relationship is really strong here at Atlassian. We have a value called win as a team, no play as a team. So our values are upholded very seriously here. And so that's really important for us. So that play as a team helps with our customers too. So in early access, we'd have regular check-ins with the customer, playing around with the product, and then using all that insight to have a better MVP when we go GA with the product, right? So that's how we take, to answer your question, right? One piece there. In addition to that, we have an annual conference called Team here at Atlassian. We just had one actually 2 weeks ago, and I was just there. We GA'd a product. I'm on a product called Strategy Collection. It's a strategic planning product for CXOs, leaders for large enterprises, and mainly. And there we demo the product, right? These booths. It was in Anaheim, right next to Disneyland. It was a blast. It was a lot of fun. Customers coming by, really excited about, these folks, they're avid Jira advocates, right? They'll evangelize Jira. These folks who come to our conferences, our partners and our customers, they're lovers of Jira, Confluence, and they're really excited about some of the new products we're coming out with. And they were super excited about the Strategy Collection because it's just, leaders know they need more visibility into how their enterprise is functioning and everything. So we take those demos, we demo it, we work together. When we're demoing, we have our head of engineering there, we have our design, we have our lead PM, and we have myself talking about just facilitating it, right? And if it's any technical questions coming up, we'll all demo it to the customer together, right? So it's a very much of a team approach with the customer. And we have customer advisory boards, we have partner advisory boards as well. So hopefully I was able to kind of help answer the questions. So there's constantly regular check-ins, and we put our customer first in everything we do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. What about the rest?
It's really interesting that Kaushik spoke about doing it as a team, right? And I think that's one of the things which I've seen work very well. Confluent and MongoDB, where I was recently, they're both companies that create developer tools, right? So as engineers building those tools and technical product managers who tend to use these tools, they are closer to the problem, closer to the customer, and have somewhat of an intuitive sense of what we are trying to build, what the jobs to be done are, right? But both of these are really large companies, and there are vast parts of the organization who are not close to the developer and have the problem that Shira spoke about, which is that we don't have empathy for how a developer would use it, right? So for example, I am in marketing and I'm in product marketing, and while I know how to write some piece of code, I would be a terrible software engineer, and anything I say about software development should be taken with a huge bag of salt, right? And so it's important for the organization to be able to collect feedback and to sort of process it and share it with the rest of the organization so that they know, so that they can build that common empathy. And so there's a lot of tooling involved in that, but I think there's this cultural aspect to it of, yes, we are always looking for feedback on what the customer values and what the customer cares about and how the customer talks about a specific problem. And then once this feedback comes into some part of the organization, it needs to be sort of collated and distributed again. At MongoDB, we used different forums for this. We used a user voice forum where folks can come in and give feedback. We had our developer advocates going out and meeting customers every week, and they would come back and provide reports on saying, hey, we had these conversations with customers. This is what they cared about. This is what they said about our product. And this is what they are saying about the programs we're running or about the campaigns we're running. Some of this resonates, some of this doesn't resonate. And as someone in product marketing, that was really useful feedback for me, right? To be able to listen from someone who spoke firsthand to the customer, who took the message and the positioning that we developed and sort of executed it on the field and come back and say, hey, this is what worked, this is what doesn't work, right? And so there was a lot of documentation around it, of sending in reports, sharing those reports, having these sort of aggregated insights from any programs that we did. And that helped foster this common understanding of what the customer values. And once we had that, it was just making sure we remembered that in everything that we do, right? New campaign, new product feature. We wanted to go back and make sure, hey, is this what the customer actually cares about?
Awesome. Shira, you already mentioned the importance of empathy, right? And understanding and putting everyone in the organization in your customer's shoes and educating them on industry specific challenges. But how do you educate yourself to then educate the rest? I think that would be great to hear. And what is the impact? Because you also mentioned in our briefing call the importance and the impact on this on engagement and on your campaigns as well.
So, when we start thinking about empathy for our customers, we have to sort of switch the way that you might think about bringing a new salesperson or a new marketer or even a new product person and engineer into a company, right? In a lot of companies that I've worked at where it's sort of more B2B in a tech world, serving the tech world, when you are your own customer, you can kind of dive right in, start talking about the product. What are we trying to solve? What are our customer values and ROI? How can we help the customer? When we're talking about our customer base, we have to start way before we get to our product. Before we get to saying, here's how we're going to help, we have to say, okay, first we're going to educate you on how our customers make money. How do they see the world? What regulations are they concerned about? What are the dynamics that they play in? What are the global trends that they care about? Who are the different players in their field? Because we don't necessarily know that. My colleagues don't necessarily know that when we join the company. So me and my team, we spend a ton of time talking to our customers, just not even understanding how they're using their product. I almost never talk about how they're going to use our product. I want to know, what did you do yesterday? And using our product was 5% of it, but what did you do for the rest of the day? What was that annoying thing that had nothing to do with motive? How do you make your money? What are you thinking about? What are your customers thinking about? And we'll spend, when we think about our onboarding progress, we'll spend 2-3 hours just talking about that before we even say the word and our product value is, and our core features are, or our main hardware is. I've spent 2-3 hours really working with our new team members to help them understand purely the context our customers are working in. That's something at someplace like Atlassian you don't necessarily have to do as much, I'm imagining. I don't want to speak for you, but that's probably a little bit of, you can start at level 10 or 5, let's say you're halfway there. And when you're working with a different population, in order to build that empathy, especially in the world that we live in today that can be so divided culturally and politically, we have to take ourselves out of the context of what we're seeing and hearing when we see the news and say, like, actually, these are all human beings. They have really hard jobs, really hard lives, frankly, ones I couldn't do, even if they could do my job way easier than I could do their job. That's 100%. And so building that empathy of thinking about our customers as people with jobs and challenges as families before we get to the technology and the product side of things.
Awesome. And all of you have great examples of what centricity means in your companies, but how do you build that customer centricity? Is through leadership? Usually leadership reinforce that mindset, right? And how do you balance top-down priorities with bottom-up feedback from the front lines?
So Shiri, you mentioned, right? It's about putting yourself in the customer's shoes and building empathy for everything that they do around your product, not just what they do with your product in the 10 minutes or 15 minutes that they interact with it in each day. When we work on highly technical products, I've seen that there's a lean, for example, with developers building tools for developers, engineers building tools for engineers. And when we do a lot of dogfooding, like you said, we do at Lesh and Kaushik, there's this bias towards thinking that we are the customer, and so we know what is best, when it behooves us to actually go out to the customer and figure out, do they actually value the same criteria in the same order that we would value it, right? We are almost too close to the problem, too close to the product, and love it for what it is and love all its little kinks and little features so much that we might want to, especially in product marketing, that we might want to talk up some specific aspect of it which our customers might never even use. So how do you sort of balance that, in building that customer centricity outside in perspective versus the internal expertise that you have in your companies?
Yeah, that's such a great point. I always like to think about it and start by the fact that let's assume I'm wrong. I always like to assume I know nothing and I'm completely wrong, and it's up to me to prove myself right. At my last company, I was at GitHub, and there were, which is a developer tool, right? So it's much more in the space that you two are both in right now. And we had this theory about our customers, and we knew it, and every single person in the whole company knew it, and this is why they came. And I'm not going to go into the details of it. I don't work there anymore, but I just had this sneaking suspicion that we were all just repeating what each other was saying. And so we went out and we got the data and we surveyed the customer anonymously. And we not only surveyed our customers, but we surveyed Atlassian's customers, right? Bitbucket and Atlassian is a GitHub competitor. We surveyed your customers and we surveyed all of those customers. And we asked the question, not just is this concept important to you, but is it why you're making decisions? And we got a resounding yes. This concept that we were talking about was important. Nobody would ever say it wasn't important, but nobody cared that much. They weren't making decisions because of it. And then we had to start, I had this data, and we had surveyed literally thousands of developers and technical leaders. And I was able to say, yes, there are a couple of thousands of us at GitHub who are all sure we're correct about, whatever it is. But we asked the customer with the perspective of, what if I'm wrong? And it found out we might actually be wrong. And so then you have to go and start to say, you can't just go to the top and be like, everything we thought we knew about our customers was wrong. We have to slowly and methodologically go team to team and organization to organization, present the data in a logical way, and allow people to push back because it's against their gut instincts and say, I think you're wrong. And you say, okay, great. Let's walk through the data logic with me. Prove me and my data wrong. I don't care. Let's go. And really come in with that perspective of like, whatever happens, happens. When we were running this survey, my survey company said, what do you want the answer to be? And I was like, what a silly question. I don't want the answer to be anything. I just want the answer. And they seemed almost surprised that I didn't care what the answer was. And I thought that was just such a telling moment on how so often we're going out to prove ourselves right.
Yeah, that's huge because it's all about validation, right? Like some of the things we gain from being customer zero, right? Like that doesn't mean everything we learn from being customer zero here at Atlassian, we don't assume that's going to be true for our own customers, right? It's just mainly when we're going to market, we need something. We need some data, right, to test our MVP. But when we're doing that as well, in the meantime, we have a customer advisory board that obviously our leadership is involved in, right? So that's where we validate some of our ideas, and we go into a fully open mindset for sure. So like surveys, maybe you do surveys, and we have this little like little group, right? Like of our customers are really, really great. and they're very diverse backgrounds, like different industries and everything, right? So that's how we validate and how our product could be best fit for our customers. So that from a top down approach, that's one piece. I think another piece is like when we do, for example, our conference, annual conference, we try to get our customers on stage as much as possible, and not just talking about how they use the product as much, but we really care about outcomes. Now, outcomes, not even just business outcomes. I used to work at ServiceNow before Atlassian, and at ServiceNow, it's very customer outcome focused as well. Meaning, like, how does this help your day to day? How does this help you and your employees' lives? Right. So that's really what's important. Like, how does this bring happiness? How does it alleviate any stresses? We're focused on those sorts of outcomes. Business outcomes are great, right? Of course, we're all in the corporate world. We're trying to get better business outcomes. But when we hear that human side of it, we're really focused on that human side here, the people side of things, and how it benefits. Because that's really that emotion, right? Is really what people connect with. And when a solution helps that person's day to day, helps that person get things done better, faster, and work as a team better, because that's what we do at Atlassian. Our motto is to unleash the potential of every team. All right. So basically, that's what we try to do, and then we try to get those outcomes, and we get those outcomes. We try to make sure those are told at our in webinars, in our annual conference, right? So and our leadership really pushes for that, and I love that. We like to have that top down approach, and same with the bottom up side. Like, I'm very focused on customer outcomes, having customer stories as well on stage, for example.
Kaushik and a lot of our background comes from sort of these workforce operations tools and Atlassian, Salesforce, etc. And I know your background is a little bit more in the, let's call it the infrastructure side, right? And it's a little bit harder to say, oh, my life was made better because my database was X or Y. Right? That might be true for the person who buys the database, but it's not true for the admin or the sales guy or, et cetera, et cetera. They're not as much going to feel like this style database for the other style database. I can feel that like in my tummy, why that's better. So when you're trying to think about how to talk about customer stories and customer outcomes in a way that is meaningful and has story and has feeling, how do you do that when it's so 4 levels deep?
You just spoke about everything that makes life very, very difficult in the world of developer marketing. I think it's curious, right? Like, I've spoken to a lot of folks who ask me, like, hey, you're in a very technical area. And it's about what's happening behind the scenes with applications. These are infrastructure pieces. How do you market this? There's not so much, it's not as typical as marketing an application and saying, hey, here's the benefit that you get, here's the tasks that you can complete with it, right? And often I'm a little blindsided by it, because in marketing to developers, the thing that I've realized is they have really, really hard problems to solve, right? And so when you think about something like a database, and to us, it's something in the background that we don't care about. But when we talk to a developer or you talk to an engineering team, and our sales teams does it, our sellers does this, and our solution engineers do it, they're almost talking to them about, hey, here's a problem that we are focusing on, here's a challenge that we have and we're trying to solve, right? And you can break it down into the building blocks of cost, productivity, ease of life, how many hours you spend on it, so on and so forth. So a big part of my job is really figuring out, for a given challenge, what are the most important building blocks? Is it cost that you care about too much? Is it your developer productivity that you care about too much? Is it being able to unlock new features? So, for example, a lot of folks today are talking about agentic systems and RAG systems and building AI into their applications, right? At a very high level, we understand the benefit, right? So when you sell, say, Motive to your customers, and you're saying, hey, we have AI enabled, you can say this is what AI will do for you. But when you talk to when you talk to your engineers about building that, they don't they think about it from the other side of it, which is like, how do I even turn on AI for this, right? What do I need to do with the data? And if we give them, like, which MongoDB and Atlas did, which is have vector search natively integrated into it, what you give them is the ability to turn on that new AI feature with work that can happen in weeks instead of months. And so at the end of the day, it boils down to the same building blocks of cost, productivity, time, but we just talk about it in a different way, right? At least that has worked well for me. And the customers that I speak to also seem to value that you can take the factors that matter and talk about it in a way that we would talk about it, so that we know that you're not just marketing this to us, but you're actually providing a solution for our problems.
I think we already covered the previous question about like the cultural changes that we need to talk about customer centricity. I'm happy to move into the next section about uh, operationalizing the customer centricity.
We live the experience, right? Like you're saying, but with Motive, like Motive was keep trucking, right? Before, is that right? Yeah. So like, I get that. Like you're dealing with like trucker. I mean, before it was truck driving, but now it's like safety, right? It has different. That's really interesting, and that's probably a challenge. And I think you had to really take like several steps back to educate them, and then like giving them a lot of context and like give them the worldview, right, before you go and like go pitch or something like that.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because we're still a like high tech, super cool technology, AI operations platform. So we're recruiting, when we think about our internal employees, we're recruiting from the same group of people that you guys are, right? And who are coming from the same companies with the same experiences. So we have to say, like, how would I bring you, Kaushik, with all of your amazing and insights into marketing a B2B platform? How do I say, okay, stop, throw everything you thought you knew because you spent all of these great, got all this great experience talking to developers and this and that. Throw all of that out for like a couple of hours. Pretend you were like just born in the world. Let's reframe the whole customer. Once we have that foundation, then you can say, well, now I can put my experienced adult professional hat back on and start to layer those building blocks back on. But there's so much of the great building blocks that we've all gotten at other parts in our career that have to just be shifted 10%. Right? Like we have to just say, let's not assume our customers know this already. Let's not assume our customers are aware of the latest trends. Let's not assume our customers like the word AI. Like, how do we bring them on the journey in a more foundational way?
Yeah, it's really cool. It's super nice it's cool because like you're like grounded in reality, right? You're not just stuck in like SaaS, stuck in the developer world, SaaS. You're kind of you're coming back to like the real world. You're starting there every time, which is great. It kind of brings, it's just like, it feels very satisfying to feel like your solution is like in touch with the real world, which is
Yeah.
true for us too. But like, I think, SaaS, we kind of get into this rabbit hole of like developer stuff and all this like tech stuff, which is great. But I think that's what's really special about maybe with Motive. So that's really nice to get to work at a company like that.
Yeah, it's so fun. I like to say that I get to save lives without touching anybody. We like genuinely like save people's lives. And one of the things that this is bringing up is, I'm having so much more, frankly, fun here because I would wake up every day. It was the same job at GitHub. It was the same job at Salesforce. And actually in Salesforce, I worked in the trucking industry too, which is sort of how I found my passion for that. But I was like, the work that my customers, the developers were doing was so important. And I had so much respect for it. And I will stand here all day and talk about how they're building the world and that's amazing. But I personally didn't care that much about making their day better. I was like, their days are fine. That's not the right answer for the person who are in your jobs. And so I was like, I better go get a different job. And so I found something that works for me. But if you guys are able to find that passion, it's such a core and important stakeholder in the world as well. I don't want to have the paradigm that like truckers are the real people and developers aren't. It's just about what you are interested in order to bring that customer centricity.
All right, so we've covered a lot today, from what customer centricity means, the systems and leadership needed to sustain it. Before we close, I'd love to hear any final reflections or advice you'd like to give to our listeners who are thinking about how to better center the customer in everything they do.
I think it's important to have champions in your organization that really care are passionate about a customer-focused mindset and drive this mindset within their teams, right? And you have to give these champions like a platform to influence decisions, encourage like collaboration and cross-functionally, and show that customer centricity. I think that's one piece of advice for that. Unfortunately, at Atlassian, we have a lot of folks who are empowered champions for the customer in particular. But if for folks who are starting their business, or something like that, that's something I would be recommend. And then establish like having cadences, like I was mentioning, like when you're doing an early access program or something, or beta testing a product, having structured processes, right? Like giving readouts every 2 weeks to your internal teams about what you've learned from your early access program, all the insights you've learned, and or like customer retros, right, on a quarterly basis. This shows that customer feedback, it's not just optional, right? It's actually very integral and is a very critical to how, or at least our company operates. And then it's using shared spaces. We use Confluence, obviously, or Slack or something. Just kind of keep those insights accessible and actionable too. That's huge too. That drives accountability and everything. Yeah, I think those are like 3 little pieces of advice I would give to our listeners.
I would say don't overthink it. If you're just starting on this journey, the power of adding a single word to the way that you speak, or changing a single vocab word, or changing a single image within, your standard platform messaging can change everything. I think a lot of the times when we start to say things like, oh, we need to change the culture, we need to have customer centricity, it's very vague, it's very fluffy. And especially if you're sort of an individual contributor, not necessarily in leadership, it can feel really intimidating to say like, what? I need to change the culture of my entire company. Like, take a breath. No, you don't. Try asking your customers how they like to be referred to and use that language instead of the language you're using internally. Write the exact same sentence and then change one word. And that's the beginning of customer centricity. And you'll see little by little, as you start looking at the analytics of what's working and what's not, those little changes are going to be marginally better and marginally better and marginally better. And you can begin to organically change that culture from the bottom and try to move that up. And so I think so often, yes, we talk about customer centricity, but it doesn't need to be this big, scary thing. It could be as simple as a couple of words, adding a phrase or two at the beginning of a sentence, changing what an image looks like, and starting from those things that you can control.
Yeah, I'll echo a lot of what Kaushik and Shira said, but to maybe summarize in a couple of lines what I think, starting small makes a lot of sense, right? If you are not at the size of Motive or Atlassian or MongoDB and Confluent to be able to get the data you need, to be able to run the service you need, start very, very small. Do like one little NPS survey. But while you should start small, you should also add structure to it, right? So it could be like, do an NPS survey, do it once a month to see how you progress, talk to a customer once a week to get feedback on whatever you're working on. And if you have different teams talking to customers at different points, have one central Google Doc where everybody can throw in their thoughts. So start small, add structure, and then as you grow, you will build and tack on the tools and the processes that you need to be able to do this across 4,000, 5,000 employees.
Well, thank you, Karthik, Shira, and Kaushik. Thank you so much for this conversation. And thank you to all our listeners for joining us on B2B Marketing Futures. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and rate us if you like it, and share it with your team. Until next time, thank you so much.